There is a kind of man you've seen, maybe once, maybe in a film, maybe in someone you knew growing up. The room gets loud, he doesn't. Someone insults him, he doesn't flinch. Something goes wrong, he adjusts. Someone tries to destabilize him and watches it not work. He is not cold, he is not numb, he is not performing indifference. He is simply grounded. His peace doesn't move when the world pushes against it. And most people who meet him walk away with the same quiet question. How does he do that? That is what this video is about, not the performance of composure, the architecture of it. The Stoics had a name for this state, not a feeling, not a mood, not a personality trait, a practice. They called it the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius, a man who governed an empire during plague, war, and betrayal, wrote about it every morning before the world woke up. He wasn't naturally unbothered. He wasn't born composed. He built it, one decision at a time, one morning at a time, one difficult moment at a time. And today I am going to show you exactly how he built it and how you can too. Let's start with the most important shift this video asks you to make. The next time someone irritates you, the next time someone's tone gets under your skin, or someone says something that sits wrong, or someone's silence feels like a statement, before you respond, before you even decide how to feel about it, ask yourself this: is this person attacking me, or are they just bleeding? No, there is a difference. And once you learn to see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people who hurt you are not thinking about you at all. They are carrying something. A rejection they absorbed this morning, a fear they have never named, an old wound that got touched in a conversation that had nothing to do with you, and the pain spilled out. Onto you, into your day, into your chest. Not because you deserved it, because you were standing closest when the pressure got too high. Carl Jung spent his life studying this. He said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. What he meant is this: the more clearly you understand your own pain, where it comes from, what it protects, what it looks like when it leaks, the more clearly you can see the same thing happening in the people around you. And when you see it clearly, something changes. The sharpness of the insult becomes the measure of someone else's wound. The silence becomes the size of someone's fear. The aggression becomes the shape of someone's very old hurt. You stop absorbing it personally, not because you don't feel it, because you can see where it actually came from. And it didn't come from you. Marcus Aurelius sat across the table from senators who wanted his power. Advisors who whispered against him, men who smiled at him in the morning and conspired against him in the afternoon. He wrote about it privately, not with bitterness, with observation. He said, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, aggressive, deceitful, malicious, and antisocial." He was not being cynical. He was preparing himself to not be surprised, because a man who is not surprised by pain does not absorb it like a wound. He receives it like information. Here is something nobody tells you when you are young. Most of your emotional reactions were written before you were old enough to choose them. You did not decide that being interrupted means you are not valued. You learned it. You did not decide that being criticized means you are not enough. Something taught you that. Maybe a parent, a classroom, a relationship, a failure that arrived before you had the language to understand it. Carl Jung called this the unconscious script. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is what happens when someone says something that seems small to them and enormous to you. The words hit a script, not a wound in this moment. A wound from 20 years ago that this moment just found. And here is the thing about a script. You cannot rewrite it until you know it exists. Most men go their entire lives never questioning why certain things move them and certain things don't, Why one type of criticism bounces off and another type lands in their chest and stays there for days. Why silence from one person is nothing and silence from another person is unbearable. Why they can be calm in a crisis but completely undone by a throwaway comment from someone they barely know. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus, who was born a slave, who had every reason to be destroyed by the world's opinion of him, taught one thing above everything else. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Not because the thing that happened isn't real. Because between the thing that happens and what you do next, there is a space. And in that space is everything. That space is where the unconscious script runs automatically for most people. And it is where the conscious man makes a choice. Let me tell you something about your anger. Not all of it, but the specific anger that comes when someone questions your competence, or disrespects you in front of others, or doesn't acknowledge something you worked hard to achieve. That anger is not about the incident, it is about the identity contract. Here is what an identity contract is. At some point, most of us cannot remember when, we built a version of ourselves that we decided was worth protecting. Smart, capable, respected, needed, strong. We didn't sit down and write it out. We built it quietly, over years, out of the things that got us through. And then we spent the rest of our lives defending it. Every time someone's words or actions suggest a version of us that contradicts what the contract says, the contract panics, the jaw tightens, the chest rises, the voice sharpens, and we call it pride, or we call it integrity, or we call it not tolerating disrespect. But a lot of the time, if we are honest, it is just an old contract trying to survive. Plato said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self, not to win the argument, not to be right, not to make the other person see what they did wrong, to conquer the part of you that needs them to see it." That is the sovereignty we are building here. Not the sovereignty over other people. The sovereignty over the part of you that other people currently control without even knowing it. Because here is what emotional sovereignty actually looks like. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of being owned by feeling. You can feel the insult land. You can notice the anger rise. You can acknowledge that something happened that was not fair or kind. And then you can choose what to do next, not from the wound, from the values. There is a technique the Stoics practiced that modern neuroscience has since confirmed. It is simple. It is available to every person watching this right now, and it is the most powerful thing you can do in the middle of a difficult moment. Watch yourself, not later, not in reflection, in the moment. When the irritation rises, step back from it slightly. Not away from the room, not away from the conversation, but back enough to observe it. As if you are watching a person named you having this experience. What is rising in this person right now? What is being threatened? What is the script that just activated? This is not detachment. This is not coldness. This is the most intimate thing you can do with your own mind, to actually watch how it works instead of just being dragged around by it. The Stoics called this the view from above. Marcus Aurelius practiced it constantly. He would step back mentally from the crisis in front of him and try to see the full picture, not from inside the emotion, but from above it, where he was not the anger, not the fear, not the pride demanding satisfaction, just the man watching his own mind, choosing his next move. When you begin to practice this, and it is a practice, it does not happen the first time or the fifth time, something shifts. The emotion stops being you. It becomes information about you. The anger tells you something is being threatened. The fear tells you something feels uncertain. The shame tells you something touched a place that hasn't fully healed yet. None of that is failure. All of that is data. And a man who reads data is never owned by it. The people who provoke you most, the ones who get under your skin faster than anyone else, the ones whose particular type of behavior seems specifically designed to undo you, they are not your enemies. They are your most specific teachers. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The irritation is the arrow. It is pointing at something. The man who infuriates you because he never acknowledges your effort is pointing at a place in you that still measures its value in recognition. The person who feels condescending is pointing at a place in you that still feels uncertain about its own intelligence. The colleague who takes credit is pointing at a place in you that still believes credit is scarce. This is not comfortable to look at. It is not supposed to be. But Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, and you cannot know yourself from the comfortable parts. You know yourself from the parts that others can still move, because every place you can still be moved is a place where the work is unfinished. Not because you are broken, because you are still becoming. The man who has done the deepest work is not the man who nothing affects. He is the man who can feel everything and still choose his response. That is a wholly different thing. Everything we have covered so far is philosophy. Let me give you the practice. 3 moves, used in sequence. In any moment where you feel the familiar tightening, the jaw, the chest, the urge to react before you've chosen to. Move 1, the pause. Before you speak, before you decide how to feel, before you let the script run, 1 breath. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this specifically. He called it the space between stimulus and response. Not a deep breath, not a meditation. 1 breath, taken deliberately. It changes the neurological state. It signals to the body that this is not an emergency. It buys you approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds is enough. Move 2, the question. In that 3-second space, 1 question. Not, how dare they, not, why does this always happen? This, is this person attacking me, or are they bleeding? That question does not excuse the behavior. It does not require you to accept mistreatment. It separates the action from the interpretation. It asks, what is actually happening here, as distinct from what my script says is happening? Most of the time, the answer will be that they are bleeding, and a bleeding person is a different problem to solve than an attacking one. Move 3, the choice. Now and only now, you respond. Not from the wound, not from the script, not from the identity contract protecting itself. From the values. What would the man I am becoming do here? Not the man I was conditioned to be. The man I am choosing to be. Sometimes that looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a calm, clear word. Sometimes it looks like walking out of the room. All 3 are valid. None of them are reactive. All of them are chosen. That is sovereignty. There is something I want to say to the man watching this, who is 55 or 60 or older. You have already been through more than most people will understand. You have already paid the price of reacting when you should have responded. You have already seen what it costs to be owned by someone else's mood. You have already buried things you wish you had said differently. And if any of this is landing, and if any part of what we have covered today is giving a name to something you have felt for a long time without words for it, that naming is not nothing. The Stoics believe that wisdom arrives when it is ready to be received. Marcus Aurelius was in his late 40s when he wrote the words that have survived 2,000 years. He was not a young man discovering philosophy. He was an older man, hardened by decades of leadership and loss, finally articulating what he had been slowly learning the hard way. The meditations are not instructions. They are a man talking to himself, working it out, still working it out. There is no arrival. There is only the daily practice of choosing the man you are. And here is what that practice gives you across a life. Your children will feel it. Not because you announce it, because you don't react the way you used to react, because you stay in the room when it gets difficult instead of leaving, because you speak last when you speak at all, because your steadiness becomes a reference point for the people who need one. A son watches how his father handles the moment when things fall apart. A daughter learns what strength looks like from how her father carries hardship. A partner measures what is possible in a relationship by what they have watched this man choose day after day, when it would have been easier to choose differently. That is the inheritance no one can take from you. Not what you left them, what they watched you become. Let me close with this. Emotional sovereignty is not a destination you reach. It is a direction you face. Every morning before anyone else makes a claim on your day, you face the direction of the man you are choosing to be. Some days you walk toward it easily. Some days you are pulled sideways before noon. Both are part of the practice. The Stoics did not promise a life without difficulty. They promised that difficulty does not have to own you. The difference between the man who is destroyed by what life brings and the man who is refined by it is not talent, not luck, not circumstance. It is the decision made daily to be the observer of his own mind rather than its prisoner, to see what others are carrying rather than absorbing it as attack, to feel the rise of the old script and choose this time not to follow it. That is not superhuman. That is available to you right now in the next difficult moment that arrives today. Marcus Aurelius had an empire. He had plagues and wars and men who wanted to bury him. He still wrote every morning the same commitment. Not that the day would be easy, that he would be ready for it. That is all any of us can do. Be ready. Elevate psyche. The philosophy never ends.